Enrique Peñalosa joins us this evening from Bogota. Enrique was mayor of Bogota from 1998 to 2001 and transformed the city's quality of life with a series of radical innovations. And here he is, Enrique Peñalosa, good evening.
Hello, Tony. Thank you very much. I will not talk about such advanced technologies, but clearly what is happening in the growth of urban population is massive. We are having 70 million more people in cities every year. And what is perhaps less understood is that cities will grow much more than proportional to that. For example, a city like Bogota, where population is not growing so much, Bogota is the size of London, approximately 8 million, but it will at least treble its square meters built because homes will be smaller, and as societies become richer, people need more city per person, more offices, more gyms, more restaurants, etc. So all over the world, we're going to be creating totally new cities. And the challenge, I think, is to do radically different and better cities. And I will talk about some very simple technologies. But I think cities are very, very wrong today in very structural ways. Because we made cities basically much more for cars. I mean, why are cities wrong? Because people are in fear, live in fear of getting killed. This is not a minor issue. If we tell any child today, anywhere in the world, watch out, a car, the child will jump in fright. And with a good reason, because tens of thousands of children are killed by cars every year all over the world. But the most amazing thing is not that this happens, but that we think this is normal, that this is progress. We have had cities for more than 10,000 years, and for 10,000 years, any child could walk for blocks without any fear of getting killed. This is only a matter of the last 80 years, and I think we have made some very profound structural mistakes in technology, in the technology of making cities. I hope that in the year 2213, people will say, how could people live in those horrible 2013 cities? And as cities are going to be built in such massive scale over the next 30, 40 years, it will be a good time to make radical changes, which sometimes can be spring from very simple concepts. For example, in transport. Clearly we all want mass transit, but rail systems, subway systems are extremely expensive. So a city like Bogota, we adopted the system invented in Curitiba, which is buses on exclusive lanes. And these systems are based on democracy. The first article of every constitution in the world says that all citizens are equal before the law. If all citizens are truly equal before the law, a bus with 100 passengers has a right to 100 times more road space than a car with one. But this is not so obvious when you try to implement this all over the world. Sometimes flagrant injustice is before our noses, and we do not see it. For example, today we think that what happened in the French Revolution was very obvious. The changes in the French Revolution were very obvious. However, they were not so obvious because 1,000 years had gone by and nothing had changed before. But let's not go so far in the past. Less than 100 years ago, women could not vote in the United Kingdom. And people thought this was perfectly normal. So almost our great-grandfathers thought this was normal, that women should not vote. Now, I think that, for example, a jam road without exclusive lanes for buses is a symbol of lack of democracy. And it's a flagrant symbol of injustice. And it's a symbol of technical incompetence. It does not take PhDs from Oxford or Cambridge. If we take a committee of 12-year-old children, in half an hour, they will realize that the most efficient way of using scarce road space is in using exclusive lanes for buses. And so we created this system, and our bus system, the Transmillennium, is moving more passengers our direction, which is the way to measure the capacity of systems, than any subway in Europe. It's moving more passengers our direction than most subways in the world, except for 4 or 5. So, but this is a political challenge and a managerial challenge. So, we are having cities, again, 70 million more inhabitants in cities every year. Why don't we create in these new cities a totally new, different design? For example, to have hundreds of miles of bus-only roads. This would create fantastic transit systems at an extremely low cost, roads only for buses, pedestrians, and bicycles. It would be so easy to introduce into the design. Or something else, I would ask the audience, how would your quality of life improve if within a few blocks from your home, you would enter a network of roads only for pedestrians and bicycles, but sort of bicycle highways, hundreds of miles long? I would say the new city could be crisscrossed by hundreds and thousands of miles of pedestrian and bicycle only roads. We created in Bogota, for example, which is an extremely dense city, one of the most dense cities in the world, more than about 50 miles of bicycle highways. And this completely changes life. We could think of urban design where people could have in every house, in every building, children could walk onto a greenway. One side of let's say, think of a city where one street, every other street would be pedestrian only. This is very easy to do when we are creating new cities. It's very difficult to do it in London or in the part of Bogota which already exists. But in a new city, one street only for pedestrians and bicycles, the next one for cars, traditional. These kind of things, which is very simple technologies, would completely change the life of people. It would be a totally different city and would be very easy to do. I like to mention that that this is not just the developing world, which is growing massively. In the United States, for example, if we take census numbers and if we assume that the households in the US are going to become a little smaller, such as Germany's today, the United States will have to build 74 million new homes over the next 40 years. 74 million. This is more than the United Kingdom, France, Canada, and Australia put together has today in terms of homes. This is not China, this is the United States. But now, the question is, how are these cities going to grow? Everybody agrees today that low-density suburbs, which is the characteristic urban structure of the United States, is not convenient for quality of life or environment. But also, most Americans don't want to live in Manhattan either. They don't want to live in high rises, facing a narrow sidewalk and a street full of cars, which is dangerous, where people may get killed, which is noisy. So the question is, we need to build 74 million new homes in the United States, and whatever is done in the United States will have a huge influence in the rest of the world. How are these cities going to be built? So why not think of an new American city which is dense, with thousands of miles of greenways and pedestrian-only roads crisscrossing it. A city which would offer density, with offering the same things that people seek in the suburbs, such as green and safe spaces for children to ride bicycles. A radically different design, because clearly we are talking about technology. What we have in suburbs or what we have downtown, neither one of those works. So we clearly need to think of a different urban model. But the second question is not only how, but where are these cities going to be built in the United States? Clearly, it should not be built beyond the existing suburbs. far away beyond the existing suburbs. So where are these 74 million homes to be built? I would say the obvious answer would be to build, demolishing tens of thousands of hectares of existing suburbs which were well located. Why is the United States so important? Because this has an enormous influence on what is to happen all over the world. A city is only a means to a way of life. So designing a city, we are designing ways of life. And whatever we're going to do over the next 40 or 50 years in developing countries will determine the world's sustainability, quality of life, and happiness for millions. I am absolutely convinced that radically new designs, very different cities are possible. They are very simple. They are politically very difficult, but they could lead us to have cities which are much more sustainable, where people will lead much happier lives.
Thank you. Enrique, you were mayor of a very large and complex city. I made a point earlier to Adam about the concern about, as you try to drive change, would a big company want to throw its weight behind the complex business that politicians have to get involved with, often which is unpopular. I mean, how would you advise politicians to drive through the kind of changes you're describing? I mean, particularly it's the first time I've heard anybody suggest knocking down large areas of US suburbs, so that's the first, I think. But I mean, seriously, what would you say to the mayor of a city whose suburbs you were proposing to knock down? How would you kind of get across the idea that this would be better for them in the long term?
Well, I think first of all, we have to dare think different. Because, for example, many of these suburbs in the United States are completely collapsed. I've been, for example, less than 2 miles from Birmingham downtown, where there is a very dynamic university. They are completely collapsed, hundreds of acres of collapsed suburbs. But in the United States, maybe they are traumatized by Jane Jacobs, who said that it was terrible to do any demolitions and urban redevelopment. But here we are talking almost about human survival, about global warming. And maybe we'll have to act and not just see how many of these cities are totally unsustainable. Another argument for politicians is equity. I think that, as I mentioned, democracy, this is not communism. Democracy means that all citizens are equal. So all citizens have the same right to road space. For example, most cities give more space to parked cars than to pedestrians and bicycles. Who decided this? Road space is the most valuable resource a city has, more than if we were to find oil or diamonds. The question is, how do we distribute road space between pedestrians, bicyclists, public transport, and cars? This is not a technical issue. This is a political issue. People with cars do not have more of a right to road space than children or people without cars. Moreover, I don't know of any constitution which includes parking as a constitutional right. So this issue, this concept of equality, of democracy, is fundamental when we are going to design new cities. And politicians will have to take care of paying more attention to democracy, which by itself would be a powerful tool to change cities.